Welcome back to the ABC General Hospital Spoilers channel, where we break down the most shocking developments happening in Port Charles. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most explosive storylines to hit the hospital in recent memory: a twisted conspiracy involving murder, blackmail, secret research operations, and a desperate fight for survival that will have viewers on the edge of their seats. Buckle up, because this story has more twists and turns than a maze, and the consequences are rippling through every corner of the hospital and beyond. The shocking arrest: Laura becomes the primary suspect in Dalton's death. The episode opens with shocking news that reverberates through Port Charles like an earthquake. Laura, a beloved and respected figure in the community, has been arrested on suspicion of murdering Dalton. The arrest comes as a bombshell to those who know her, and when the news reaches Britt's ears, it becomes the catalyst for a series of events that will change everything about this investigation. The authorities believe they have their culprit, the case seems to be moving toward closure, and the real perpetrator appears to be successfully hiding in plain sight. However, Britt, armed with knowledge of the truth and the moral weight of witnessing an innocent woman face justice for a crime she didn't commit, makes a crucial decision that sets the entire story in motion in a new and dangerous direction. Britt understands that remaining silent while Laura faces the consequences of a crime orchestrated by someone else is unconscionable. She knows the real story behind Dalton's death, who truly planned it, who benefited from it, and what dark purposes it served. The arrest of Laura forces Britt to confront her own conscience and make a decision that will put her directly in the crosshairs of a powerful and dangerous man. She cannot let an innocent person be convicted while she holds the key to the truth, even if revealing that truth puts her own safety and security at profound risk. Britt's courageous decision: becoming a witness against Sidwell. After careful consideration of the gravity of the situation, Britt makes the courageous and selfless decision to testify against Sidwell. This decision is monumental because it means stepping out of the shadows and directly confronting the very person who has been manipulating events, controlling outcomes, and maintaining a stranglehold over Britt through coercion and threats. By choosing to become a witness, Britt is essentially declaring her independence from Sidwell's control and placing her faith in the justice system to protect her and hold the guilty party accountable for their crimes. When Britt takes this stand and begins to reveal everything she knows, the testimonies are absolutely damning. She doesn't hold back, nor does she sugarcoat any details. She lays out the complete picture of Dalton's murder with surgical precision, describing how it was planned, executed, and covered up. She reveals the motivations behind the killing, the desperation that drove someone to commit such a heinous act, and the calculated nature of the crime. Britt's testimony is powerful, convincing, and credible. She is not a casual observer reporting hearsay. She is someone who is directly involved and intimately familiar with every aspect of what transpired. Beyond the murder itself, Britt goes further in her testimony. She exposes the shadowy research operation that Sidwell had been running, a secret project that operated in the dark corners of the hospital and potentially beyond, with unclear purposes and questionable ethics. This revelation opens up entirely new dimensions to the investigation, suggesting that Dalton's death may have been connected to this covert research program, that there were secrets worth killing to protect, and that powerful interests were invested in keeping this operation hidden from scrutiny. The research conspiracy adds layers of complexity to the case, transforming what might have seemed like a crime of passion or personal vendetta into something far more calculated, systematic, and sinister: the web of coercion, Huntington's disease, and Sidwell's leverage. As Britt's testimony continues to unfold, she reveals another crucial element of Sidwell's control over her: the threat involving Huntington's disease. This revelation is particularly powerful because it demonstrates the psychological manipulation and coercion that Sidwell employed to keep people in line and prevent them from speaking out against him. Britt discloses how Sidwell had leveraged knowledge of her Huntington's disease diagnosis as a weapon, using her medical condition as a tool to threaten and intimidate her into compliance. The threat wasn't merely abstract or hypothetical. Sidwell had made it clear that if Britt didn't cooperate with his plans, didn't keep quiet about his activities, and didn't maintain his secrets, he would have the power to make her life infinitely worse, whether through manipulation of her medical care, public revelation of her condition intended to shame or marginalize her, or other forms of retaliation. Britt understood that Sidwell had the ability and the willingness to weaponize her health condition against her. This form of coercion is particularly insidious because it preys on someone's deepest fears and vulnerabilities, turning their own body and medical reality into a lever for control. By testifying about this threat and explaining how it was used to coerce her into silence and compliance, Britt is breaking free from Sidwell's psychological grip. She is acknowledging that she was manipulated and threatened, but she is also demonstrating that the power of truth and justice can overcome even the most powerful leverage that a manipulator possesses. Her decision to testify despite these threats becomes even more courageous and significant when we understand just how much personal vulnerability and fear she is overcoming in order to do so. Sidwell's calculated response, retaliation, and desperation. What happens next reveals the true nature of Sidwell as a man who cannot accept defeat, who cannot tolerate resistance to his will, and who will stop at nothing to maintain his control and power. Upon discovering that Britt has broken ranks and is testifying against him, Sidwell shifts into a completely different mode of operation. He moves from manipulation and coercion to direct, physical action. The threat that was previously psychological now becomes tangible, immediate, and violent. Sidwell's first action is to cut off Britt's access to her medication supply. For someone living with a chronic condition like Huntington's disease, losing access to medication is not merely an inconvenience, it is a serious health crisis. Medication adherence is often crucial for managing symptoms, maintaining quality of life, and potentially slowing the progression of debilitating conditions. By severing her access to essential medications, Sidwell is directly attacking Britt's health and well-being. It's a move designed to weaken her physically, to make her more vulnerable, and to punish her for her betrayal while simultaneously creating the conditions for further harm. But cutting off her medications is only the beginning. Sidwell then escalates his retaliation dramatically by physically attacking Britt within the hospital itself. This is a shocking and brutal turn of events, an act of violence committed on hospital grounds, in a place that is supposed to be a sanctuary of healing and safety. The attack is not the action of someone who is confident in his ability to escape justice through legal means. It is the desperate, violent response of someone who feels cornered and is willing to commit assault to silence a witness against him. Britt's condition deteriorates, a life-threatening medical crisis. The combined effects of losing her medication supply and being violently attacked push Britt's body to the brink of total failure. Her condition deteriorates rapidly as she lapses into a state of severe physical decline that brings her to the edge of death itself. The exact nature of her crisis isn't immediately specified, but the gravity of the situation is unmistakable. Britt is dying. The medication withdrawal, combined with the physical trauma of the attack, creates a perfect storm of medical emergency that threatens to claim her life. Britt finds herself in intensive care, barely clinging to life, her body struggling to continue functioning. The machines monitoring her vital signs likely show readings that are deeply concerning to the medical professionals surrounding her. Every breath may feel like it could be her last. Every moment that passes without medical intervention could bring her closer to death. This is the moment when Britt's courage and her decision to testify are tested not just emotionally or psychologically, but in the most fundamental, physical way. Will she survive this ordeal? Or will Sidwell's retaliation succeed in silencing her permanently? The revolutionary surgery, a desperate gambit for survival. In this darkest hour, when Britt's survival seems uncertain and her life hangs by the thinnest of threads, the medical team at General Hospital makes a bold and unconventional decision. Rather than proceeding with standard, conventional treatments, which might prove inadequate given the severity of her condition, they opt for a revolutionary surgical procedure. This is not a surgery that has been performed thousands of times with well-established protocols and predictable outcomes. This is innovative, cutting-edge medical intervention, the kind of procedure that carries significant risks but also represents perhaps the only realistic chance of pulling Britt back from the brink of death. The surgery itself becomes a turning point in the narrative. It's not just a medical procedure, it's a dramatic moment of hope in a story that had become increasingly dark and dangerous. The skilled surgeons at the hospital, drawing on their expertise and willingness to take calculated risks, perform what might be described as a miraculous intervention. The procedure is successful, and Britt survives. Against overwhelming odds, after coming perilously close to death, she is given a second chance at life. She is pulled back from the precipice and begins the long road to recovery and healing. The case transforms. Jason Morgan identifies the real threat. The near-death experience of Britt, combined with the evidence from her testimony and the investigation that has been unfolding, fundamentally changes how the case against Sidwell is understood. The narrative that was initially focused on Laura as the primary suspect now shifts dramatically. The truth that Britt risked everything to reveal, that she nearly died to protect, becomes impossible to ignore or suppress. Jason Morgan, working as an investigator in this case and bringing his own skills and intuition to bear on the situation, makes a crucial breakthrough. He connects the dots that link all the recent events: Laura's arrest, Britt's testimony, Sidwell's violent retaliation, and Britt's near-fatal medical crisis, and arrives at an unmistakable conclusion. Sidwell is the real threat. He is not just a peripheral figure in this case. He is the central villain, the driving force behind Dalton's murder, the orchestrator of the cover-up, and the desperate man willing to commit violence and attempted murder to protect his secrets. This identification by Jason Morgan represents a crucial moment of justice and truth triumphing over deception and manipulation. The investigation that had gone off the rails, that had targeted an innocent woman, is now properly focused on the actual guilty party. Sidwell, who had manipulated events, intimidated witnesses, and attempted to silence Britt through violence, now finds himself clearly identified as the real danger to the community and the primary object of the investigation. The broader implications, systemic corruption, and hidden dangers. The unraveling of Sidwell's conspiracy reveals troubling truths about how power can be abused within institutions like hospitals. The secret research operation that Sidwell had been running raises questions about oversight, accountability, and the potential for unethical activities to flourish when proper checks and balances are absent. The fact that Sidwell could threaten someone using their medical condition as leverage suggests vulnerabilities in how confidential health information is protected and how vulnerable individuals can be targeted for manipulation. The attack on Britt within the hospital itself is particularly disturbing because it violates the sanctity of a place that should be dedicated to healing and safety. When violence can occur within the hospital's walls, when medication supplies can be cut off in ways that endanger patients, it raises serious questions about security protocols, staff oversight, and the protection of vulnerable individuals. The storyline thus transcends being merely about one man's crimes and becomes a commentary on institutional vulnerability and the potential for systemic failures to enable wrongdoing. Conclusion: truth and justice prevail despite personal cost. This complex and gripping storyline ultimately celebrates the power of courage, truth-telling, and the willingness to sacrifice for justice. Britt's decision to testify against Sidwell, despite the threats she faced and the retaliation she suffered, demonstrates that some things are worth fighting for even when the personal cost is extraordinarily high. Her near-death experience doesn't break her or silence her. Instead, it serves as a catalyst that brings everyone's focus precisely where it needs to be. Laura's exoneration becomes possible through Britt's bravery. The truth about Dalton's murder is finally brought to light. The secret research operation is exposed to scrutiny. And Sidwell, who believed he could manipulate circumstances and silence his opponents through intimidation and violence, finds himself clearly identified as the primary threat and the object of justice. The revolutionary surgery that saved Britt's life becomes a symbol of hope and the triumph of medical skill over despair. Next, we will learn about the issue of Willow Tate and Drew Kane racing toward a risky second walk down the aisle that could implode in spectacular fashion. General Hospital spoilers have been teasing that this do-over wedding might not be a fairy tale redemption, but the prelude to a brutal emotional ambush. Drew is clinging to the dream of marrying Willow, sealing their bond, and proving to everyone in Port Charles that their love can survive scandal, bullets, and betrayal. But as the legal noose tightens around Willow's neck and memories from that fateful night start to twist in Drew's mind, what should be a romantic comeback could turn into the coldest betrayal she has ever faced. First wedding in ruins. To understand why this second wedding is so loaded, it is necessary to revisit the disaster of their first attempt. Willow called everything off in front of friends and family once she learned that Drew had given in to fiery temptation with Nina Reeves, shattering her trust in an instant. That public humiliation cut deep for Drew, who stood there with the ring in his hand, watching the woman he loved walk away as whispers rippled through the crowd and the entire town judged him. In typical Port Charles fashion, the emotional wreckage did not simply fade away. The breakup left Drew wrestling with guilt and anger while Willow tried to convince herself she was done with him, even as she kept circling back to the connection they shared. Their first failed trip to the altar turned into a wound that never fully healed, and that scar is exactly what makes any second attempt so dangerous. Willow's legal nightmare. Complicating everything is the very dark cloud hanging over Willow. She is facing serious criminal charges tied to the night Drew was shot. Instead of being just a grieving almost bride, she has become the accused. The woman many believe tried to kill the very man now swearing she is innocent. That twisted dynamic victim and alleged shooter locked in a romance is pure fuel for the media, and anyone in Port Charles who already doubts Willow's judgment. Willow, desperate for anything that might help her case, has started to lean on Drew not only as a lover, but as a lifeline. He is the one person whose belief in her innocence carries real legal and emotional weight, because his testimony and his public stance could shape the narrative in court. In Willow's eyes, standing beside Drew as his wife might transform her from a suspected attacker into a devoted partner wrongfully accused. But that hope comes with terrifying risks. Drew's high-speed proposal. Spoilers suggest that during the week of November 24th to 28th, Drew will finally decide that faith in their love is worth more than fear of repeating the past. Determined to rewrite their history, he may set up a heartfelt, intimate proposal perhaps at the Quartermain estate or on the pier where so many Port Charles turning points happen, and ask Willow to marry him all over again. This time, the ring is not just a symbol of romance, it is also a shield, a promise that he will stand in front of her in the courtroom as well as at the altar. Willow is likely torn the moment those words leave his lips. Part of her has never stopped wanting this future with Drew, but another part hears the ticking clock of her possible conviction and wonders if saying yes now is about survival as much as love. Her acceptance, if she gives it, will probably be a mix of gratitude, panic, and longing, which sets the stage for a wedding built on shaky emotional ground. The rush to the altar. Once Willow agrees, Drew may push for a rapid-fire wedding, insisting they cannot wait for perfect timing when a trial date is looming over them. Becoming Mr. and Mrs. Drew Kane before stepping into court gives them a unified front, a visual story for the jury, devoted spouses standing shoulder to shoulder against a wrongful accusation. From Drew's point of view, racing to the altar feels like an act of protection locking them together so that the dock cannot easily drive a wedge between them. There are also potential legal and strategic layers beneath Drew's urgency. A marriage could influence how the public and potential jurors perceive Willow, turning her from a lone defendant into a woman fiercely defended by the man she supposedly tried to kill. Even if spousal privilege does not solve everything, the optics of a loving husband defending his wife could complicate the prosecution's attempt to paint her as cold-blooded. Yet longtime GH fans know that rushed weddings almost never go smoothly, and this one is practically begging for disaster. The last-minute dress fittings, the whispered doubts, and the uneasy stares from family who remember the first catastrophe all create an atmosphere of doom under the romance. It feels less like a peaceful march to happily ever after and more like a countdown to an emotional explosion. Dark memories resurface. The most chilling possibility is that Drew's own mind may betray Willow before she ever reaches the altar. Somewhere between the proposal and the big day, Drew could experience a horrifying flash of memory from the night he was shot to images and sounds that he had previously blocked out or never fully understood. If those fragments suddenly suggest that Willow did pull the trigger, everything he has been telling himself about her innocence could crumble in seconds. Imagine Drew getting hit with a vivid flashback, the smell of gunpowder, the echo of a shout, a glimpse of Willow's face lit by the muzzle flash or the sound of her voice calling his name right before he went down. He might dismiss the first flash as trauma, but as more pieces snap into place or seem to doubt would start to eat away at his loyalty. Once that seed of suspicion is planted, every moment with Willow, every nervous glance, every unanswered question about that night could look like one more sign of guilt. Therapy sessions, medical checkups, or even a conversation with another Port Charles survivor could trigger these returning memories. GH loves to use hypnosis, head injuries, or emotional confrontations to unlock buried truths, so it would fit perfectly if Drew's mind chose this exact moment to clarify what really happened. The tragedy is that whether the memory is accurate or distorted, Drew's change of heart would feel just as real and just as devastating to Willow. Explosive evidence twist. Of course, it might not be Drew's mind that turns on Willow, but new evidence that crashes into their world right before or even during the wedding. A fresh ballistics report, a recalculated timeline, or secret surveillance footage no one knew existed could suddenly surface, painting Willow as the most likely shooter. Even if the evidence is incomplete or manipulated, it might be convincing enough to push Drew over the edge emotionally. Maybe a witness comes forward claiming to have seen Willow near the scene with a weapon, or a text message from her that night emerges with a threatening tone that can be easily misinterpreted. Perhaps the gun's fingerprints or gunshot residue tests turn up something the original investigators missed, turning what used to be reasonable doubt into a damning story. Faced with everyone from the dot to his own allies telling him the facts now scream Willow's guilt, Drew could feel trapped between his heart and what looks like undeniable proof. That inner war is exactly what would make any decision at the altar so explosive. If Drew walks into the ceremony believing that Willow might actually have tried to kill him, every vow he is about to speak will feel like a lie, and that pressure has to break somewhere. And in classic GH fashion, it is easy to imagine that breaking point arriving in front of the entire town. Public humiliation at the altar. One of the most brutal twists would be if Drew chooses to go through with the ceremony only to stop at mid-vow and turn the moment into a public reckoning. Willow, thinking she is finally getting the second chance she begged the universe for, would stand there glowing with fragile hope as he suddenly hardens and pulls back. Instead of saying "I do," Drew could announce that he remembers the truth or believes the new evidence and refuses to marry a woman he now sees as his attacker. The humiliation for Willow would be staggering, mirroring the way she once humiliated Drew when she called off their first wedding, but with even higher stakes. Guests would gasp, phone cameras would lift, and within hours the entire town would be buzzing with clips and gossip about Drew publicly accusing his almost bride of attempted murder. In that instant, Willow would not only lose the man she loves, but also any remaining shred of public sympathy she had as a defendant. Drew, for his part, would be acting out of a toxic mix of rage, betrayal, and what he believes is righteous justice. He might tell himself that exposing her in front of everyone is the only way to truly hold her accountable, just as she once exposed his affair at their first ceremony. But underneath all that fury, there would likely still be a part of him that loves her, making the scene even more emotionally twisted. Fallout across Port Charles. If Drew blows up the wedding, the shockwaves will rip through every corner of Port Charles. Michael, Carly, and the rest of Willow's circle would be forced to choose sides fast, with some defending her innocence and others wondering if Drew's accusation means they had been blind all along. Nina, who is already tangled in this mess because of her past connection with Drew and her complicated history with Willow, could find herself dragged back into the conflict whether she wants it or not. In the corporate and criminal spheres, Sonny and other power players would also take notice. A public scandal of this magnitude could affect business alliances, legal strategies, and even who feels safe aligning with Drew or Willow in the future. The courtroom drama that follows such an altar explosion would be even more charged, turning every witness testimony into an extension of that ruined wedding day. Meanwhile, Willow's emotional state would be hanging by a thread. Betrayed, humiliated, and still staring down prison time, she might lash out, shut down, or even start to doubt her own memories of that night if enough people insist she is guilty. Her next choice is who she trusts, who she fights, and whether she keeps trying to prove her innocence could reshape her entire future in Port Charles. Where the story could go next. General Hospital spoilers hint that whatever happens with Drew and Willow's second wedding, it will not be simple or quiet. Curveballs are practically guaranteed. The show could pull a last-minute reversal, with someone else confessing or crucial proof emerging that shifts suspicion away from Willow just as Drew is about to destroy her at the altar. Or the wedding might implode, sending them into court as bitter enemies rather than united lovers, setting up one of the most intense courtroom showdowns GH has delivered in years. What is clear is that this rushed walk down the aisle is not just about romance, it is a pressure cooker for secrets, guilt, and half-remembered truths from a violent night. Whether Drew ultimately stands by Willow or turns on her in the most public way possible, this storyline is poised to redefine both characters and shake up the power dynamics of Port Charles. So as fans wait to see if I do turns into your guilty, this wedding feels less like a happy ending and more like the beginning of a dangerous new chapter.